And this is what happens when you are diving into information on a daily basis that you are. And you come across something in all of the information that you follow, and you're sitting there and it's like, hey, I think I'll hit that story. And you hit that story, and it ends up being a deep dive, and I've got to find out how this actually happened, how curiosity got into our friends at Extra Point, and figured out how they decided that they wanted to go after college soccer. And they've done it for 2 seasons in a row. And we'll find out about proportionality and what it takes to win titles and all that kind of stuff. And for this, we go into the Central Time Zone, and it is a great opportunity for us to be able to bring folks in that we haven't had on before. So we sit there and we cut the scissors, and we bring in Matt Brown. Oh, he's wearing the Brazil jersey. Look at that. Nicely done. Welcome to the morning show. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me, John. I feel like I had to look the part here this morning. I appreciate you having me.
Well, yeah. So you're the one that looks the part, and I'm the one that's in a hotel room this time. So that's where we are. It flipped. Normal circumstances, you look at the studio space, it's scarves and everything all over the place. But I'm in a hotel room this time. Okay. So I admit, full disclosure, I subscribe to the newsletter. I get the dailies. I look at everything. You're followed on the Twitters and all of that. So full disclosure, that was the genesis of all of this going in. And I love the work that you and the 38,000 folks that are there put together on a daily basis. And I saw the stuff on college soccer, and I was intrigued about the work that you guys were doing there about determining, okay, is there any kind of proportionality to success when it comes to budgets and amount of money spent? I want to go back to the beginning of it. How did this just come across your bow? Was it just natural curiosity when it came to college soccer and financials?
Legitimately, it was. So we do at Extra Points is a major part of that coverage is covering finances, covering vendor contracts, covering the business of the college athletics industry as a whole. And every single Division I and Division II program, whether you're public or private, has to file an itemized annual budget report with the NCAA. If you're a private school, it stays with the NCAA. But if you're a public institution, with a few small exceptions, that can be obtained by the general public, by coaches, by nosy reporters like me through open records requests. And we do hundreds of these every year. So we've been building a database of these financial reports. We have over 200 across Division I. And we've been trying to isolate this spending, not just by sport, but by some of the line items. And tomorrow, I think we're going to run one on college baseball. But we do have a fair number of college soccer coaches and sport administrators who read Extra Points, and they had asked, "Hey, we know you did this last year, and it was smaller in scope. Your analytics software is a little bit more improved now. What can you tell us about how those budgets are evolving? What are people spending their money on, especially now that we have a little bit more data in the post-portal, post-NIL world?" And that's what we did with both women's soccer. And I have a tab up here on my other monitor here for men's soccer that details the operational budgets for virtually every single team in Division I that's public.
So how many FOIA requests, as someone who probably files more FOIA requests than probably a good number of governments in the United Nations, how deep a process was this? How many FOIA requests are we talking? When it comes to cranking this stuff out, I mean, do you weigh yourself down in Google Docs? I mean, it's fascinating to me to get to the financials. You mentioned the process. Tell me about the process. I'm now completely and totally enthralled.
Sure. So, I have to admit, it would be better for me professionally if I described the open records process as some kind of like arcane art that only I and like 7 other nerds can master. It's really, and in all honesty, the process isn't super complicated once you know where to file the request for every school. And because Extra Points has been running for 6 years, we have a shared spreadsheet that has the custodian of records or the FOIA process for every institution. And so we can do some of this stuff in bulk. The more difficult thing is figuring out what to do with the data once you get it, and then figuring out how to hound a couple of these smaller institutions that maybe take a long time to get back to you. And we're still waiting on Power 4 data from Georgia Tech and Florida, even though the due date for giving us this information was 2 months ago. That's part of just how this stuff works. But once we get it, we manually convert these PDFs into CSVs to break out every single itemized income and expense. And then we can run that through some spreadsheet and formulas. We've kind of vibe coded a program or two to help us do some of the calculations, and then we'll go double check them to compare that information. And it took a long time the first time we've done it, but every year and every sport, it gets a little bit easier. And now I think part of the fun thing is we have the raw data. Now we just need to get a little bit better at telling useful stories with that information. And the useful stories, we hope, whether you're a coach in college soccer, a fan of college soccer, or potentially a commissioner, administrator, or somebody that works in the business world that's trying to promote and grow this sport, as the U.S. Soccer Federation is trying to do right now, and many private investment groups.
So you do the men's version, and that was back in July of last year. And it was interesting to look at operating budgets, and it's the same. But much of the big players. It's the ACC, it's the B1G. It's those guys that you anticipate. Clemson was the one that, well, obviously you're number one, and you've blown the bell curve on the men's side back in July from fiscal 24. You're dropping almost $4 million on it, $1 million more than number two. What did you learn about doing the men's version back in July that could help you do the women's version that came out just a little bit ago?
Yeah, and it's funny. I actually have the fiscal year 25 men's data. I haven't published it yet, but I have it pulled up on my other monitor, and it looks a little bit different from 24. I don't mind telling you guys that the top spending team again in fiscal year 25 was still Clemson, operating budget of about $3.6 million.
Okay.
But the gap there isn't nearly as large as it was before, and the number two team might be a little surprising to casuals, probably not surprising to your audience, but it was Marshall. That reported spending a little over $3 million. And then you have mostly a concentration of Big Ten programs throughout the rest of the top 10. You have Kentucky in that group. You have Virginia Tech in that group. And then you kind of move down. What's interesting to me about collegiate soccer, which is different than baseball or softball or many other sports, is that the financial gap between the proverbial big boys, your Clemsons, your ACC, and your Big Ten institutions, is not that much larger than a very motivated non-power conference institution, or somebody like an Oregon State, a James Madison, an Akron, a New Hampshire, somebody that teams that are trying to not just make the postseason, but win some games. The gap there might be $1.5 million. $1.5 million in college football pays for a position coach, right? That's your muscle milk budget. And I think that creates a pathway where if you're a South Florida and you decide we really want to go all in and we want to raise an extra $600,000 to go to this budget, that can go a meaningfully a very long way compared to what it might do for basketball or football.
So now the numbers geek in me is like, you could send that 25 stuff to me at any time.
I got you. Yeah.
But I find it interesting that, you go away, you go with the go fives, the group of five and all that kind of stuff. Is there a proportionality? Is it direct proportion from amount of money spent to level of success and getting closer to winning championships? Or are we still in that loss leader category at points where you're getting close, but it's not quite there? Where is there a proportionality when it comes to men's soccer?
Looking at the graphs, the best data we have right now, there is some correlation between a total size of your operating budget and your RPI. There is a little bit less of a correlation between total budget and straight win-loss percentage, and I think some of that has to do with the quality of schedule and how regional play here is set up. But it's not a completely one-to-one linear expression. And in fact, if I'm looking at our most recent data correctly, there's almost as strong a correlation between spending on scholarships as there is for total expenses. And I think that's an important thing to think about, particularly for men's soccer, where prior to the House settlement, it would not be uncommon for teams to be competing in Division I men's soccer and not even fully fund the total amount of scholarships that they're permitted, right? You might run out 3.5 and use this primarily as a mechanism to earn international tuition money. than you are trying to actually win, conference titles or championships. So if you don't have to spend a ton of money on fancy facilities or the most powerful advanced stat solutions or anything, if you just fund scholarships, you're going to be ahead of the curve compared to some Big Ten institutions. And I think that is something that we're beginning to see more in other Olympic sports.
Mm-hmm.
And I expect to see that in the future for the New Hampshires and Vermonts of the world that think, why there's no reason why we can't compete with Ohio State and Michigan here.
Matt Brown, our friend from Extra Points, hanging out with us, discussing financials, college soccer, and FOIA, and all those things in the alphabet soup with all their great findings that have come out over the last year plus when it comes to men's and women's soccer on the collegiate side of things. Was there a number or a school on the men's side that leapt out at you that was a more of a surprise than the others when it came to, wow, I didn't anticipate that they would be spending this much, or wow, I didn't anticipate that they weren't spending this much and more successful? Was there one that shocked you?
I am a little surprised looking at the last data at both Penn State and Rutgers, who through the last season that we have the financial data for, were not terribly good programs, right? Under 500, RPI not in the top 75. And it's not like these are programs that have, I think, really strong traditions of fan support, of commercial support in any way. They're both spending more than $2 million a year on their total operations budget. And some of that, I think, is a reflection of the state of New Jersey's accounting rules, which makes some of their salaries just look a little bit bigger than they actually are. But you have to figure that if you gave a program like Vermont, or if you gave a program like I don't know, even in NC State, some of those resources, that they would be able to deploy those a little bit better, right? And it's Rutgers. It's easy to pick on in particular because you can pick 9 other sports, I think, where what they're spending is in no way proportionate to their either commercial or academic success. I think the bottom end of the Big Ten for both men's and women's soccer surprises me for spending relative to actual results. And I think it's maybe wouldn't be surprising to follow the sport deeply, but how much success you can have with a budget of only $1.5 million. You don't need a lot of money to be a nationally competitive collegiate men's soccer team.
And I think it's real easy these days to just kind of ish on Rutgers in general, considering that they're $90 billion in debt right now with their athletic program.
Yeah, I mean, money's not real, but money is especially not real at the state university. They have a lot of structural financial problems there, no doubt about it.
Yes. All right. So let's go to the other side and the newer findings before you release the men's version 2.0. Women's side, and for me, you go to the top, and that was the number one stunner for me. This literally was, stone cold at WrestleMania X8 to Scott Hall kind of stuff. I mean, you see that team that is there at the top, and I'm going, excuse me, what? I was stunned at the number one that you saw when it came to budget there on the women's side. Please divulge for those who haven't had the chance.
Sure. You and me both. And so if you look at the most recent financial data, just for pure operational spending, the largest reported budget in the country last year belonged to Utah State. Now, Utah State's a fine program, right? They were a top 20 team. They got a little unlucky in their first tournament match, but they were a very good mid-major women's soccer team. And they have fan support, and the school would like to be competitive there. But you don't expect them to spend more money than Washington or UCLA or Tennessee, especially because I've been to Logan, Utah. Logan, Utah is a fine place. I would not describe Logan as an especially high cost of living area compared to maybe some of the West Coast markets that have college soccer. And this is why I think it's important to go deeper into the weeds beyond just the top line total expenses number.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've learned from just writing about MFRS reports for a long time is that they're not always as completely standard or as uniform as you might think that they would be. The biggest reason why USU's number exploded so much last year is that they did some major stadium renovations and put all of that money, the $3.5 million that they used to update the scoreboards and change some of the seatings, they put it into the operational budget for that 1 year. You go back to fiscal year 24, Utah State's budget's around $1.5 million. Something that lines up a little bit more with the Pac-12, like old, new Pac-12 or Mountain West kind of program. Beyond Utah State, the top 10 are going to be pretty familiar I think to many of your listeners, they're primarily SEC institutions. Penn State's really high up there. Texas Tech is really high up there. And you kind of have to, the rest of the Big Ten is a little bit further down, but your Texas A&M, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, they're all north of $3 million and have been for the last couple of years.
The Utah State number, when I was looking at it, I was thinking, and I wasn't thinking about upgrades or anything. I was going in cold, and I was thinking because of how geographically separate they are, because last time I checked, you don't have PJs going into the Logan, Utah airport to take teams and send them to, to their matchups wherever they are in the sport. You don't see that big 747 come in to take the football program off on a Saturday. I was thinking that it was specifically having to do with just operational expenses of getting out of Logan and trying to play in conference.
Yeah, I thought about that. The school that I would be the perfect example of that sort of thing would probably be Penn State, where the campus runway is not campus, the State College Regional Airport is famous for having a really short runway. And if you have a big old plane, you can't fly there. And many Olympic sport teams, when they go to Penn State, fly to Harrisburg and then have to bus an hour and a half. It's one of the most geographically isolated major schools I've been to. I have to think it's like them, Washington State, and St. Bonaventure are the three places where I've been that are like real middle of nowhere sort of places. But that doesn't seem to be where the cost is. I mean, Logan's not that far from a major airport. You can actually break this down by who spent the most on travel. Penn State's in there, but the number one would be Washington, and I think that makes sense just because Seattle's far from everything, and you are going to have to charge. There's not many bus trips you could take if you're a UW Husky for virtually any sport.
Yeah. When it comes to this whole process, and you've mentioned how it has kind of worked its way and it's got its own rhythm now when it comes to data gathering and assimilation and paperwork and all these kinds of things. How it seems like most of the schools are cooperative. You mentioned there are a couple of outliers, at least early on in our conversation.
Yeah.
Are they as receptive as they appear to be, or is it kind of begrudging, or when it comes to wanting to assemble this information so we all can be more informed? What is their approach when it comes to letting you know about these kinds of things? You sit there and you knock on the door, and and it's like maybe Penny and Sheldon and Big Bang Theory, and they go, yeah, okay, I'll open the door and find you an answer. How receptive are they when it comes to all of this information that you're trying to get?
It's a fun question. It completely runs the gamut because I've been doing this for a long time. And for those that are unaware, when you file an open records request, the state institution, whether that's a university or a civic government or a lawmaker or anybody else, are legally compelled to respond to that request and answer it. And there are some institutions that understand the mission of what I'm trying to do, and they understand that these requests are not adversarial in nature, or at least most of them aren't. And it's a very painless process. And there are some that I think, and I'm not unsympathetic to this, like this freaking guy again. I might file 11 of these a year asking for coach contracts or vendor deals. I get how that could be annoying. And many of these institutions outside of like the P4 might have one clerk, 1.5 paralegals that are doing this. And so they're overworked. And sometimes that can be not adversarial, but they're not exactly jumping for joy to give me the things just because they've got 40 other requests to do. And then you have a couple where it is pulling teeth. And I'll tell you the places where it's usually the hardest. There's a handful of states in this country. They're all in the Southeast. It's Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, that require you to be a resident of that state if you want to file a request.
Really?
I live in Chicago.
Yeah.
So what I have to do if I want to get the financial information for South Carolina or for Tennessee State or USC Upstate or something is I have a burner. I will pay somebody in those states to file on my behalf. And some of those states are like, sure, we get this. We do this for national reporters all the time. And some people are like, excuse me, sir, you can't have a straw buyer for an open records request. Like I'm trying to buy a gun. And that becomes a bigger pain in the butt. But eventually we get through it all.
Is there one school or a handful of schools in your analysis of both the men's and the women's game that was a complete and total head scratcher to you with either the amount of money that they were spending on things like salaries and infrastructure, and not necessarily on the program itself? What was there one where you're sitting there going, man, there's dollars here that should be going in other directions, and you're bringing in high profile this and high profile that? Were there ones where you're sitting there and you're looking at the bottom line going, man, what are you spending this on?
I think I'd flip this a little bit. One of the things that I have really come to believe from doing this for a while, not just from looking at spreadsheets, but as somebody who writes about business and who believes in the momentum and trajectory of soccer, particularly on the women's side. I think it might surprise people about how many Division I schools do not ticket for women's soccer. They do not charge anything. They are not trying to make this any kind of revenue generating event. It's just you get in free. If you want to go watch the Tar Heels at UNC, you absolutely have to go buy a ticket, and they can, they'll report, hey, we generated, six figures in ticket sales this year. Oklahoma State will do that. Just about everybody in the SEC will do that. But there are some decent teams, not just among mid-majors, although that's definitely true, but even a couple of power programs that don't charge at all. And I understand why they don't do that, because I think, all right, our attendance is only in the couple of hundreds, and it might cost us more money to have a Ticketmaster person and like the infrastructure to do that. I don't think it is practical to expect many women's soccer programs to be completely financially self-sustaining in the next couple of years. But I do believe if institutions treat men's and women's soccer, but I think especially women's soccer, as a live event that can grow and can have alcohol sales and multimedia rights sponsorships and halftime sponsors and everything that we expect for college basketball and college football, I think if people put a little bit of that energy behind it, those revenue numbers can grow. It's probably a little bit harder on the men's side where you have USL and you have the rest of the American soccer pyramid and other competition for kind of developmental soccer leagues. But on the women's side, it's different. And more of those people are going to play professionally in the United States. I think it is time to begin to make stronger investments in the commercial infrastructure to support that product in college.
So, of course, you drop the hammer at the end of this thing and open up like 19 different doors for me as we go. You realize, of course, that means you're going to have to come back.
If you twist my arm, I'll find a way to do that. You bet.
Absolutely drop the hammer with the women's soccer stuff. I love that. Okay, hit the blatant promo for us and let everybody know who is not a part of the Extra Points universe. Let them know how they can do it and what they can expect.
You bet. I write a newsletter 4 days a week called Extra Points, which covers business, policy, and off-the-field stories in the college athletics industry. So sometimes that's looking at money and its relationship to winning in men's and women's soccer. Sometimes that's college baseball. Sometimes that's breaking stories about college basketball scheduling, about conference realignment, about video game licensing, and NIL legislation, and what's happening in Capitol Hill. All the kind of stories that shape who's good on and off the field and how universities engage with college athletics. And you can find that at extrapointsmb.com. The financial data that we're discussing here, that's generally behind our subscription paywall, but there's still 2 free stories a week and plenty of things to engage with for no money at all.
And you are, in fact, the man for doing everything that you are doing with all of this stuff. It's great to see you. Don't be a stranger. You now know where the garage door opener is. If you ever want to vent your spleen, you know where the key is under the mat. Great to see you, Matt. Go wrap your breakfast, get your second cup of coffee. We'll see you soon, my friend.
Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate you.